Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Pebble Beach Initial Research Show. Hopefully you had a very successful farmers insurance this past week and are enjoying the NFC Championship game that is going on. Thank you for tuning in during an action-packed Sunday across the sporting world. College basketball, of course, the AFC and NFC Championship. All of that good stuff. But we are here to cover everything Pebble Beach and the Pebble Beach Pro-Am field for the week. As I mentioned, hopefully you had a very good Farmers Insurance Open. It was another week of close what-ifs, shouldas, couldas, and wouldas. Tony Finau ties for the lead going into the back nine on Saturday for the lead at the Farmers, and then falls apart. So two straight weeks of very close outright hits. We're going to get there across the finish line here very, very soon, I feel like. I've been feeling pretty good about my research, my analysis, all of that. But if you had Matthew Pavone, let me know. Jump in chat. Would love to hear about that. How was your DFS this past week for the Farmers? And, of course, anything that you're looking forward to for Pebble Beach. So speaking of, let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. They've put a lot of work in updating and upgrading their site in the past couple of weeks. I believe a lot of the issues have been ironed out. So go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where I post research weekly on the PGA Tour. That'll be no different. That comes out usually Mondays, Monday afternoons. And I definitely have some interesting thoughts and interesting patterns for the previous winners of the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. So if you want to see the weekly research I do on the PGA Tour, then give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player exposure for the week's slate of DFS contests that I play. So if you want to see those pieces of information, give me a follow over at X as well. Then lastly, for social media, Gabe's X handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation for the tournament of the week, and his article comes out every Sunday, and then he updates you throughout the week with his own version of recent form, course history, all that good stuff. And if you are a subscriber to his article, which is free to do, by the way, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday evening as we continue the DFS talk over in his Substack chat after calls. So go show Gabe some support. If I could talk, go show him some support. So, follow him over on social media and subscribe to that article. Again, it's free to do so. Lastly, we are live. Chat is open. I want to hear from you all on all the things that I mentioned. Did you have Matthew Pavone at 130 to 1 or whatever he was? What do you think about Pebble Beach and the adjusted and different style of event that it is this week than what we normally get at Pebble Beach? Who is your lean early on in the week? Would love to hear from you all. So let's do our initial research for the 2024 Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. And I teased that it's a little bit of a different format this year for the Pebble Beach. Normally, we get 3 courses. This is another usually 3-course rota, like what we get at the Amex. Normally, we have Pebble Beach, Spyglass Hill, and Monterey Peninsula, and a Saturday cut. That's not the case this year. With this being a signature event, we have a no-cut event this week. Again, because of the signature status that it has. They are still keeping the Pro-Am portion of the tournament for the first 2 days. So a professional and an amateur will partner on Thursday and Friday, but the amateurs are not playing on the weekend. So that is one way that the tournament is different this year. And they are not included or not playing Monterey Peninsula this year. Hey, James, thanks for jumping in chat. It's been a while. Hopefully things have been well. Would love to get back into the Friday night showdowns, but with schedules and some of these tournaments have still been delayed on Fridays. I'm waiting for things just to kind of settle down and get into a routine. But the goal is to try to get back into those, considering that we were somewhat successful with those last fall and especially the fall before that. But hopefully things have been well. You have had a good start to your PGA season. As I mentioned in the intro, 2 straight tournaments now where close could-have, should-haves, and would-haves. Had Sam Burns at the American Express. He falls apart. Tony Finau yesterday at the Farmers. He falls apart. So we're close. We're getting close. Haven't hit any of the 150,000 to 1 long shots that seem to be coming in every week. But we're getting close. So thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. As I was mentioning with Pebble Beach, it's a very, very different format this year with only 2 courses, Pebble Beach and Spyglass Hill. This is going to play very similar in style to what we just had at the Farmers, where Pebble Beach and Spyglass Hill are played on Thursday and Friday, and then the entirety of the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, is all played at Pebble Beach. So we're going to focus on Pebble Beach this week. We'll take a look at some Spyglass Hill data. Again, courtesy thanks to Gabe for that. But we're going to focus on Pebble Beach mostly. Pebble Beach Golf Links, very, very iconic course on the PGA Tour. Host of several majors. Very regular course on the PGA Tour. Nothing to do with architect. This is a Jack Neville and Douglas Grant original design. Has been redesigned a few times. Probably most notably Jack Nicklaus's redesign of the par 3 5th, par 3 6th. It's the 5th of the 6th. The par 3 has been redesigned, or was recently redesigned by him. It's been redesigned a couple of times, but nothing to do with any of the major architects that we can filter in for Fantasy National. Pebble Beach is a par 72 that is extremely, extremely short. As you can see, 6,972 yards is what's listed on the scorecard. A par 72 that does not reach 7,000 yards. So we are going to be looking at a lot of short course metrics again this week, just like we did for the American Express. Whereas last week we were looking at extremely long courses. We played the longest course on the PGA Tour, Torrey Pines. This is one of the shortest. It's not the shortest, but it is one of the shortest. Excuse me. At 6,972 yards, the Stimp says 10.5. That would be slow to perhaps average. A lot of that depends on the wind, since the majority of Pebble Beach is played on the coast. So if the winds really pick up, they have to keep the green speeds down to keep play going. One of the most notable aspects of Pebble Beach, besides the scenery and the fact that it is played on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, is the smallest greens on the PGA Tour. Their average green size is 3,500 square feet. That is the smallest by a fairly significant margin. Harbor Town does rival that, but you don't have very many PGA Tour greens that average less than 4,000 square feet. Pebble Beach is one of them, along with Harbor Town. So the smallest greens on the PGA Tour is what we're looking at Pebble Beach. Plenty of fairway. These fairways are somewhat forgiving. They do narrow in at landing areas around 300 yards, but wide enough fairways, quite a bit of rough. Now, it says number of water hazards is 1 with the Pacific Ocean. It does come into play on about, I would say, 6 of the holes. Your turn, so from about hole maybe 5 or 6 to about hole 11 is played along the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Of course, the iconic downhill par 3. You could argue water doesn't come into play on that, but if you were wayward or just terrible like I am, water would definitely be in play. Of course, very famous Jordan Spieth shot over the gorge, so water comes into play there. So a few holes with water in play, and it's all based around the Pacific Ocean. But the grass type is something we're going to be talking about quite a bit for the next couple of weeks. We talked about it at the Farmers. We're going to talk about it this week. These greens are Poa annua, same as what we had at Torrey Pines, here at Pebble, and then in a couple of weeks, I think, when we're at the Genesis Invitational. So we're going to be looking at Poa annua greens again. The rest of the grass around Pebble Beach is a combination of rye and Poa annua. The rough is kept maybe 2 to 3 inches, so not nearly as difficult to play out of as the rough was at Torrey Pines this past week. Sorry. The rough is not as long, will not play as difficult as it did at Torrey Pines, but can be somewhat troublesome. Some notes here on Pebble Beach. It has been very wet leading up to the tournament. It has been a very rainy Southern California here in the past probably month or so. So I would have to imagine that the course is very soft, very receptive, not going to get a whole lot of rollout on drives. And that rough could play a little bit thicker and harder just due to the amount of rain and precipitation they've had out there. Would be a little bit of a guess. As I was mentioning, Pebble Beach, 3rd shortest course on the tour last year after playing the longest. Smallest average green size on tour. And then we'll talk about Spyglass Hill just a touch. The key with Spyglass Hill is a Robert Trent Jones Sr. design. Renovated in 1999. I'm not sure exactly what all of those renovations entailed, but it is a Robert Trent Jones Sr. design, and he's got a few designs on the PGA Tour. Spyglass Hill is also a very short course. 7,041 is what's listed on the scorecard. It is also a par 72. The average green size, of course, a little bit larger than Pebble Beach, but not by much. We're still dealing with small greens over at Spyglass, 5,000 square feet. You got 4 holes with water in play. The fairways, even though the acreage is very is a lot less compared to Pebble Beach and most other courses, it's really a pretty forgiving driving course, all things considered. The the fairways aren't necessarily the most difficult to hit. Average width to maybe even a little bit forgiving in landing areas. But Spyglass Hill also has Poa annua on the greens and rye and Poa annua throughout the rest of the course, fairways and rough. So a lot of similarities here. Both courses are par 72s, both very short, both have very, very small greens. Pebble Beach being the smallest on the tour. Spyglass pretty short as well, pretty small in terms of greens as well. So there is a look at the 2 courses that are going to be played this week. Again, with the focus on Pebble Beach, since that will be 3 of the 4 rounds. So let's go into Fantasy National. Take a look at this week's field for the Pebble Beach Pro-Am Signature event. And again, this is a signature event, so it's a no-cut event. Our top players in the past 36 rounds: Rory making his PGA Tour debut since he did not play the Century Tournament of Champions like he customarily doesn't. He's making his debut here on the PGA Tour. So Rory, Victor Hovland, JT Poston, Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Eric Cole, Xander, Ludwig Aubert, Max Homa, Brian Harman. The who's who is here. I have not seen of any field changes or withdrawals ahead of the second signature event on the PGA Tour. You will see that I do have some players starred. That is indicating that they are an alternate. So I wanted to make sure that I indicated that as we go through our research tonight and into tomorrow for the Data Dive show. Any player starred is an alternate. There is one player missing, however. It is our most recent champion, Matthew Pavone. He has not been populated in the AT&T Pebble Beach field over on Fantasy National, so just keep that in mind. Hopefully he will be loaded in to the page view tomorrow or in time for tomorrow's show. But just to let you know, Matthew Pavone is not in this page view. So the first thing that we're going to do, since we just came from the GCSAA tournament fact sheet, I mean, look, both of these courses are extremely short. So let's take a look at performance on short courses in the past 36 rounds or 12 months, past 12 months, whichever happens. So your top performers on short courses: Russell Henley, Eric Cole, Ludwig Aubert, Ben On, Justin Thomas, Emiliano Grillo, Denny McCarthy, Keegan, Scotty Scheffler, and Sungjae are top 10 in terms of performance on short courses. We're not going to look at a scoring filter just yet. And then, of course, we'll take a look at some approach and putting and such after we look at the course breakdown in Fantasy National. So first thing I like to do in terms of looking at a scorecard, let's look at where par falls on the scorecard. That'll give us a general idea of how difficult or easy a course plays. And we look the 9th most difficult hole playing over par. The 10th most difficult hole still over par. 12th is still slightly over par. So we're looking at a fairly difficult course. Not as difficult as Torrey Pines per se, but still a pretty difficult course. You have to go in between the 14th and 15th most difficult holes, or said another way, the 4th or 5th easiest holes before we find where par is. Now there are some scoring opportunities here at Pebble Beach. Of course, with this being a sub 7,000 par 72, you're going to have some very short par 5s. The par 5 6th plays to almost a half a shot under par. You've got the par 5 18th plays under par. Where's the others? The par 3 7th, the iconic downhill par 3 actually plays under par, and then the drivable par 4 4th plays under par. But with that, you'll see just how many of these holes play a fairly significant amount over par. The par 4 second, which used to be a par 5, I believe has been converted to a par 4. You see, third of a shot over par. The par 4 ninth, almost 4/10 of a shot over par. The 8th and the 10th, quarter of a shot over par. So right around the turn is generally the most difficult portion of Pebble Beach. 8th, 9th, 10th, and even the 11th generally plays fairly difficult. The par 5 14th, the massively uphill par 5 on the back 9, you see actually plays a little bit over par, is one of the most difficult par 5s on the PGA Tour, along with, I believe it was 13 or 14 at Torrey. That's also a pretty difficult par 5. Not a lot in terms of birdies here. pars have generally been pretty good scores. You see a very good eagle rate on the 6, the par 5 6 that plays, 4/10 of a shot under par, but nothing else even reaching 1% on any of these par 5s or the drivable par 4. So not a lot in terms of eagles. We're definitely not going to be looking at eagles. Maybe some birdies are better gained, but we'll really dig into that tomorrow. But yeah, there is a look at Pebble Beach in terms of a scorecard. Very, very difficult holes, especially around the turn, with a few scoring opportunities sprinkled in. Again, the par 4 4th, par 5 6th, par 3 7th. The par 5 18th generally plays under par. We move to strokes gained by shot type. For our top 10s, much more even distribution than what we had last week when it was a lot of ball striking with quite a bit of putting at Torrey Pines. Much more even as the around the green outweighs the off the tee already in terms of top 10 finishers. Approach still higher than putting, but not by much. Top 5s, the putting is still starting to catch up with the approach. You see how even the ball striking and the short game are in terms of strokes gained. And then for our winners, the approach actually takes off a little bit away from the putting, but you see how massive of a difference the around the green is here at Pebble Beach as opposed to off the tee. There are some forced layups. The course just in general just isn't long, so the driver is not a focused aspect at Pebble Beach. And with the smallest greens on tour, you would expect players to be missing them fairly often, so around the green will definitely come in. So nothing too out of the ordinary, except for the fact that maybe the putting is lagging slightly behind for our winners. It's just goes to show that you're going to have to hit your irons very well around Pebble Beach to contend. We look at strokes gained by hole by par. As you would expect in a professional environment, most of the pros are gaining the most strokes on these par 5s, but the par 3s are outweighing the par 4s slightly for the top 10s. Moving into the top 5s changes drastically, where the par 4s really take off away from the par 3s, and then for the winners, par 4s actually try to catch up to the par 5s. So it's interesting to note that the par 3s are there for the top 10s, but not the top 5s of the winners. So it'll be interesting to see what the data shows in Microsoft Excel, maybe even a little bit tonight, but a lot more so tomorrow in the Data Dive show. Alright, we've got that on the top 10s. Hole composition. I don't know what's going on here with Pebble Beach and the whole composition. This chart is all kinds of messed up. But you do have the very short par 3. Again, the iconic downhill par 3 with the ocean in the background. You got one extremely short par 3, one from 175 to 200, and two from 200 to 225. You have a drivable par 4. You have a bevy of 350 to 4 and 400 to 450 par 4s. You do have a couple 450 to 5 par 4s. Let's see, you got a 451. You have a 498. But you also have two extremely long par 4s, 529, 531 on the scorecard. And that is there. And then the par 5s, 3 of them measure from 500 to 550. You do have one from 550 to 600. The par 5 14th that plays extremely uphill the entire way. So it plays longer than the 587 on the scorecard. So again, apologies for the messed up hole composition, but hopefully was able to explain that. Approach shot distribution. You see the majority of approach shots, as you would expect at a short course. Look at this massive difference in approach shots from 100 to 125 compared to the average tour event. And that's the length of approach shot that is most common at Pebble Beach. So we'll definitely go in and see tomorrow if this range lends itself to high leaderboard success. But in your initial research later, throughout the rest of tonight and into tomorrow, might want to look at guys that are proficient from 100 to 125 yards, considering the amount of short par fours that are here at Pebble Beach. Cut line, this is going to be a little bit skewed, of course, because this is generally a 3-day cut or a 54-hole cut. But it has been -5, -6, hovering in that range for the past, 7 to 8 years. Can get fairly tough with being a -3 due to the wind. If it really lies down, it can get very easy. But we're not worried about a historic cut line this week because this is a no-cut event. But this does help give you an idea how generally easy or difficult a tournament has been. Pebble Beach, at least to me, has always played roughly average. Scoring distribution, there are a few birdies around here, especially on those par 5s. The par 3, 7th, generates a few birdies. So you do have quite a few birdies, but what you also have around Pebble Beach is a whole lot of double bogeys. You can see a pretty sizable bar here in terms of double bogeys. So if you stack the scores that are over par with the scores that are under par, you're actually going to get a few, just slightly more holes that are under par than over par, but it's very slight. And you can see the Eagles bar is essentially non-existent. So pretty much right at average. Driving accuracy, these fairways are generally forgiving, fairly wide, especially for being as short of a course as it is, and there are forced layups at Pebble Beach. So the driving accuracy, very, very high, 71.5% here versus 61 and some change at the average tour event. Now greens, as you would expect with these extremely small greens are not hit as often in regulation as opposed to the average tour event. And then scrambling is actually somewhat difficult here. Players are not as successful scrambling here as they are at the average tour event. 3 putts per round, kind of indicative of POA. We saw just how many 3 putts there were at Torrey Pines. Even though these are the smallest greens on the PGA Tour, look, you almost have a half of a 3 putt per round. 3 putts are generally a factor here at Pebble Beach, and a lot of that has to do with the POA ANA. Distance, again, forced layups, extremely short course. Just distance is not a factor. It's just not a factor here. And with the small greens, if players are hitting the green in regulation, they're going to be much closer in proximity to the hole. 26.5 feet here versus 29 feet at the average tour event. So there's a look at Pebble Beach. Let's go to Spyglass Hill just very, very quickly. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on Spyglass since it's only going to be played once. But I do want to show you Spyglass in a few different ways. Most notably, the hole composition here. So the par 3s are evenly spread. You've got an extremely short par 3 like at Pebble Beach, but you do have a very long par 3, 200 to 225. So 1 in each range there. 2 drivable par 4s over at Spyglass. Let's see if we can find them. I believe this is the correct 18th hole here at 430. So you do have a par 4 325, and you have a par 4 349. So this one's a kind of a stretch to be drivable, but the biggest of hitters can get there. But the 325 I know is drivable. So 2 very short par 4s. You've got 2 350 to 4. The majority of your holes at Spyglass are from 400 to 450. 2 from 450 to 5, and then your par 5s, This is where a little bit of the change comes in, a little bit longer than Pebble Beach. 3 of the 4 par 5s fall from 550 to 6, and then 1 from 500 to 550. Again, kind of mirroring Pebble Beach in regards to birdies and bogeys. They're somewhat even, and quite a few doubles over at Spyglass, and the eagles are just non-existent. You can see, I mean, you got a decent one here, 2.5%, 2%, but nothing, you know, that jumps off the page for being such an extremely short course. I do have a few birdies, but there are doubles out on Spyglass Hill if you are not careful, especially if the winds pick up. And then the last thing we'll take a look at, just a little bit of statistics over at Spyglass. Accuracy, like Pebble Beach, higher than the average tour event. Green regulation percentage, much lower, just like Pebble Beach. 3 putts per round, higher. That's, again, due to the nature of POA ANA. Now, the difference between Spyglass and Pebble Beach, players are much more successful scrambling here as they are than they are at Pebble Beach. So there is the biggest difference. But these courses are pretty similar in style. Before we go back to the page view or this week's field, let's take a look at some scoring conditions just very, very quickly at some historic Pebble Beach Pro-Ams. Last year, the Monterey Peninsula course played easy. You actually see Spyglass Hill played difficult, along with Pebble Beach on a couple of rounds. But Spyglass Hill was difficult. In 2022, Pebble Beach and Spyglass were generally average. And Monterey is generally pretty easy, although Pebble also played easy somewhat in 2022. The easiest of the 3 courses is Monterey. It's not in in use this year. It is interesting to note that in 2021, the Pebble Beach Pro-Am turned into a 36-hole cut, just due to all the things that were still going on, ridiculousness going on. Now, Spyglass played difficult both rounds in 2021. Pebble Beach played difficult in round 2, average in round 3. You see the wind kind of picked up a little bit in 2021. So you get a little bit of mix of everything here. Some easy, some difficult. So some of it depends on the wind, but what you see consistently, short courses, we're on POA, obviously, and then the rough length has been anywhere from short to average. Again, with the amount of rain that they've had, this could lend itself to being a little bit more difficult this week. That's something that I'm only speculating. I can't confirm that, but it might be a little bit more difficult this week just due to the amount of rain they've had in Southern California. All right, so now that we've went through the course breakdown in Fantasy National, let's take a look at a couple of different things in here. We know that off the tee, just not really all that important this week, so making sure that I don't have any filters selected. In the last 36 rounds, our top strokes gained approach players: Scotty Scheffler, Lucas Glover, Colin Morikawa, Alex Smalley, Xander, Sam Ryder, Hideki, Chris Kirk, Victor Hovland, and Eric Cole. Aaron Wright is starred. He is an alternate. Don't want to overlook around the green. Definitely going to be a pretty big portion of the tournament this week, or a pretty big factor. Top around the green players the last 36 rounds: Ricky, Scotty Scheffler, Russell Henley, Mackenzie Hughes, Brendan Todd, Wyndham Clark, J.J. Spawn, Matt Fitzpatrick, Justin Thomas, and S.H. Kim. And then lastly, you'll have to bear with me. We're going to look at some putting. I need to find and filter out all of the POA courses. So, of course, we're going to be looking at Pebble Beach. We'll be looking at Riviera, where we will be in 2 weeks, but it is also POA ANA. And, of course, where we were last week, Torrey Pines South. So let's apply those course filters. We're going to back this time frame out to the last 2 years. this is one change that has happened over at Fantasy National. I would love to go back further. I can't. This is one of the changes that they have made. The furthest we can go back is 2 years. So this is a very small sample size. Just be aware of that. Very small sample size. Only the past 2 years. But in the past 2 years, our best putters on Poa annua, Max Homa, Denny McCarthy, Jason Day, Taylor Montgomery, Peter Malnati, Maverick McNeely, S.H. Kim, Sam Ryder, Adam Schenk, and Mackenzie Hughes. So probably a decent area to look as well for your wagers tomorrow, and some early ideas on players you might want to look at for your DFS lineups, as putting, as we know on Poa annua, is its own animal. Let's just go ahead and jump straight to the tournament history here at Pebble Beach. Strokes gained total tab. Our defending champion is Justin Rose. But again, it's a slightly with an asterisk, since there was a 54-day cut and a full pro-am portion of the tournament. But Justin Rose is our defending champion. In the past 5 years, we have 2 players, really kind of 4 players, that have separated themselves in terms of strokes gained total that are in the field this week. 2 have really separated themselves. Nick Taylor is our strokes gained total leader, a previous winner in 2020, a T14, a T20, has had quite a bit of success here at Pebble Beach. And Jason Day, again, with his prowess on Poa annua, like he had going into last week with Torrey Pines, and then he just didn't play well this past week, but he's also been very, very good at Pebble Beach. You see 3 top 10s, including 2 top 5s, and another top 25. Jordan Spieth, very, very good here. Patrick Cantlay, 3 for 3, nothing outside of a T11 in his only 3 years here. He's been very good. Maverick McNeely has been very good. Tom Hoge, your winner in 2022. Max Homa's been good in 3 years here. Hostler and Denny McCarthy, Seamus, Keith Mitchell, 3 for 5. Matthew Neesmith, 4 for 4. A couple of clunkers have made cuts, but decent. Previous champions that are here, we have Justin Rose, our defending champion. Tom Hoge in 2022. 2021 was, I would have to cheat and go to that one. Yep, I'm going to have to cheat. It's escaping me. Daniel Berger. Daniel Berger wins in 2021. 2020, Nick Taylor. 2019, I believe, was somebody on Live. Now I'm going to have to cheat again. 2019, Phil Mickelson. Yes. Phil Mickelson's won this twice. Jordan Spieth has won this back in 2017, I think, perhaps. So quite a bit of different play styles, but what all of those players are generally pretty good at is their short game, particularly around the green. Phil Mickelson, Jordan Spieth, Nick Taylor doesn't get enough credit for how good he is generally around the green. And you see putting on Poa. You see Nick Taylor's around the green there. Now Tom Hoge is a bit of a difference, and I believe I closed that tab by a mistake. Tom Hoge is a bit of a outlier there, as he is generally a ball striker. Justin Rose, very good putter on Poa. So there is a look at some of the players that have performed well the past 5 years at Pebble Beach. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not played well. J.J. Spawn, 1 for 4. Grayson Murray, 1 for 4. Patrick Rogers, even though he's a California guy, 0 for 4 here at Pebble Beach. Perhaps some of that is the Pro-Am portion. Hard to say. But for whatever reason, he has not played well here. Smalley, 1 for 2. Players who have actually played it somewhat. Davis Riley, 1 for 3. Eckert and Villegas, even though they're alternates, 1 for 2. There's a look at the players who have not played Pebble Beach well in their few attempts. All right, with that, that's a pretty good segue. Let's go ahead and move on over to Fantasy National. And we are going to first, let's take a look at some of this research that Gabe was kind enough to provide. This is the kind of information you are going to be able to receive if you are a subscriber to his article. First thing we'll look at, toughest courses last year on the PGA Tour. You see, Spyglass was actually in the top 10 in terms of difficulty. It averaged playing over par. It was, more tough than Bay Hill, at least in relation to par last year. Valspar's always pretty difficult. Of course, the Masters and the Memorial. But Spyglass was pretty darn difficult last year. You just didn't have a whole lot of eagles. Very few eagles, only 6 over there. And very, very few birdies. Very, very few birdies. And Pebble Beach isn't easy by any means either. It's, inside the top 20, right at 20th. It played to about a half a shot under par. So we're looking at, some mildly difficult courses. But what's also very interesting is that 2 of the 10 hardest holes on the PGA Tour, of all of the PGA Tour, 2 of the 10 hardest are at this tournament this week. The aforementioned par 4 ninth plays to almost 4/10 of a shot over par. I think Fantasy National actually had it at 4/10. Just very, very difficult. 19 birdies versus 69 bogeys and 17 double bogeys on that par 4 ninth. Just difficult. Very, very difficult hole. Par 4, 504 yards. Hang it just off your screen. Par 4, 504. Does play downhill, but you have the ocean on the right. Very difficult bunkerage in front of the green. It's just a tough hole. But not to be outdone, Spyglass, the par 4 6th, was the 10th hardest hole on the PGA Tour last year. Also played very close to 4/10 of a shot over par. So there are several opportunities to put up big scores, and not in the good way, at the tournament this week. So I just thought that was interesting. I wanted to share that with you all, that 2 of the 10 hardest holes on the PGA Tour are here this week. Again, this is thanks to Gabe and the research and information he puts together. And, I can't say enough that it's a very, very good article. It's a very good read. And the information he provides is very, very useful week in and week out. Now we move to the comparison course for Pebble Beach. And again, this will be skewed a little bit because we only normally get 2 rounds of data at Pebble Beach. Normally it's a 54-hole cut, so you would have Spyglass and Monterey that does not accrue shot link data. So a little bit skewed, but you can see the importance of around the green, at least compared to the other shot types here at Pebble Beach. Approach is still going to have a little bit of a factor. Distance does not matter at all. You can see almost 40% less than the average tour event. Fairways, 20% more important. I would have thought the 20% would have been in the greens. Greens is still fairly high at 10%. So I'm quite anxious to go into the prior leaderboards tomorrow, figure out if fairways is something that we want to look at or if it's just the greens. I know we're going to be looking at some greens since these are the smallest greens on tour. I am a little surprised by this fairways gained number. Looking at scoring, Eagles is right at average. Nothing here to suggest we need to look at Eagles by themselves, but look at the sheer volume of bogey avoidance versus birdies gained. So at least, in one night's of research, it's looking like we're going to want to look at bogey avoidance as opposed to birdies gained. Looking at par threes, again, for the top 10s were somewhat important. And it says for players in the top 30, 7% more important than the average full field course. Those two links are carrying the most weight. We'll see tomorrow in the detail whether that's true or not. But at least in terms of comparing against other full field courses, these two look like they're carrying the weight. The par fours, a little bit less. But with the sheer amount of 350 to 4 par fours here at Pebble Beach and Spyglass, I can understand why this number is showing as most important, especially when most courses don't have 350 to 4s, or if they do, it's like 1 or 2, and Pebble and Spyglass have quite a few. Might be a little bit misleading, but it's not misleading is you just got to score. Like at Torrey Pines last week, you just got to score on these par 5s. These par 5s are where you take advantage of Pebble Beach and Spyglass. Lots in the par 5s, and again, with the bevy of 500 or very short par 5s at Pebble Beach, look at the percentage there. Huge amounts of importance on these short par 5s. Very quickly, proximity. That's a little bit comforting to see, at least, is that when we went to the course breakdown, we saw that 100 to 125, was double in terms of prevalence or amount of shots taken from that range. You can see it's carrying a significant amount of weight against the others. So more information we'll have to look at tomorrow in the Data Dive show. But there's a look at Pebble Beach, comparing Pebble Beach to other full field courses on the PGA Tour. We'll end the show off this evening with the early look file. This is another way of looking at that strokes gained total tab or the tournament history tab in Fantasy National. This is performance at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am the last 5 years. You can see Patrick Cantley played it 3 times, average finish of 6th. Jason Day, Max Homa have each averaged a 10th place finish. McNeely's averaged a 13th. That doesn't count his withdrawal. So if we remove the players who have only played it once, we get a feel for the players who have played Pebble Beach consistently year over year in the past 5 years, or at least played it multiple times. What have they been doing well? Let's just do the players who have averaged the top 40. This is 17 guys. You see off the tee, 0.8, a little bit higher than what I would have thought it would have been. But there's not really a lot of high numbers here except for Victor Hovland, which is kind of his game. You just have some solid performances, 1.0, 1.3, 0.8, 1.3, just a lot of okay to good performances, but nothing truly spectacular. Approach is at a 0.7. Interesting that the off the tee is actually higher than the approach. I would have not said that. But at least for the players who have played Pebble Beach well and consistently well, a little bit more so in off the tee. Around the green, this average probably will drop a little bit, but I want you to focus up here at the extreme top. 1.9, 2.5, 1.5, some heavy dark green up here at the most elite portion of the players who have played it well. This is a 0.6. I figured it was going to fall off because you have a couple of players that are bringing it down. But around the green is going to be pretty significant this week. And then putting, this is a 1.0. So you've got a 2.6, a couple of 2s. So it's a lot in the short game. A lot in the short game at Pebble Beach, which is what you would expect. All right. Distance, even though most of these players are positive, I just don't see distance being a big factor. I really don't. I want to look at the greens, and as I thought, because these greens are so very small, look at all the heavy green up here, and the players who have consistently played Pebble Beach the best. Patrick Cantlay, a lot in the greens gained. Maverick McNeely, Nick Taylor, your strokes gained total leader, leading in greens gained. So that's a very big correlating statistic there. Looking at the top 40, I mean, this is a 2.6. That's a pretty big number. And only 2 players are negative, Brendan Todd and Denny McCarthy. Scoring, surprisingly, it looks like it's the birdies. So we've seen this quite a bit this year, that looks like the more consistent scoring metric was bogey avoidance. This is a 2.6. This is a 2.7, so slightly leaning the birdies gained, but the higher numbers are in the birdies gained. But look at that consistency in here. I mean, none of these players are negative in birdies or bogeys, for what it's worth. So I do want to take a pretty big look into that tomorrow. And honestly, we might be looking at double bogey avoidance, considering how much double bogey prevalence there is at Pebble Beach and at Spyglass. Par threes, look, even though they diminished for the top 5 in your winners, this is a 1.7, only 1 player negative in terms of par 3 performance that's played Pebble Beach well. I think they are going to be a little bit more important than what we might think early on in our research. This is a 1.7 par 4s, 3.2 par 5s, which are off your screen, I know, but 2.0. So what we were seeing statistically is being backed up. Par 5s are carrying quite a bit. I mean, Neesmith, who is an alternate, negative. Cam Davis has been slightly negative, but lots of extremely good performance on these par 5s at Pebble Beach. You can see that there. Cantlay and Day and Homa, even Hostler and Brendan Todd have been very good at the par 5s here at Pebble Beach. Don't want to overlook the par 4s, and especially look at that, the 350 to 4 par 4s. All of this positive in here. 450 to 5 actually has all of the positive in here too. So again, this looks like some information we'll have to dive into tomorrow in the Data Dive show and the priority leaderboards. We'll end off the show this evening looking at proximity. Again, the most prevalent range is here. Okay, I guess. You got some pretty good performances from Day and Homa and Taylor Moore and Denny McCarthy. Okay, I guess. But I'll bring you back to... I'll bring everybody back into the field and give you a sorted look on average finish. That's going to do it for the show this evening. Thanks to James for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. It's good to see you again. It's been a little while. I know you are more into the showdown arena, and I'm wanting to get back into that, but I'm schedule and most of these events do get delayed out on the West Coast, so hopefully we'll get settled into a nice routine. We'll try to get back into the showdown arena and the Friday night streams. But thanks for jumping back in the chat. And thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, taking an in-depth look at statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst's view of what he sees, and trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Be on the lookout tomorrow for the research, as I have, you can see, done a little bit over there and have been color coding some things and whatnot. So be on the lookout for the research tomorrow over on social media. And a quick note that the DFS Tactics show will be 10 o'clock this Wednesday, not 9. Now tomorrow the Data Dive show will still be at 9, but due to a scheduling conflict, and this is probably going to be true for the majority of February, the DFS Tactics show will be at 10 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday. No way around it. Just have a scheduling conflict. So make sure you make a note of that. Put it in your reminders. 10 o'clock on Wednesday. But tomorrow we'll be at the regular time at 9 p.m. Thanks again for all the support. For all of the wagers you made this past week at the Farmers. For all the DFS contests you played this past week at the Farmers. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.